Good evening, everyone, and welcome to September's Development Management Committee. Before we get started, I'd just like to inform you that the meeting is being streamed via YouTube tonight. Those of you that are speaking, please could you ensure that your microphones are on whilst you are speaking? Sorry, I can hear it coming back. Right. Okay, so we will start with apologies. Do we have any apologies?
We have apologies from councillors Dew, Goulson and Jordan, Chair.
Thank you. Number one on our agenda is approving our minutes for the meeting held on the 18th of July 2022. Do we all agree that this is a correct record of the meeting held? Okay. The second item on the agenda are members' interests. Are there any declarations that need to be made about any of the items that are on our agenda tonight? Councillor Wakeford.
Thank you, Chair. In an abundance of caution, with respect to 4B, the application pertaining to Brampton, I don't represent but am a resident of the village, albeit elsewhere. But I have had no involvement in discussions about it and have an open mind and propose to participate in debate.
Thank you. Any other councillors? Okay, so we will move on to item number 3, which is development management, other applications. Our first one is to consider a report by the Planning Service Manager.
Thank you, Chair. This relates to application 22-01526. It's an application on 9 Ditchfield Road, Somersham. It's coming to you as the applicant is an officer of the council. So I have a short presentation. This is the location of the property. The application is for the change of use of land to residential curtilage and the provision of a 2-metre high close boarded fence, demolition of a carport and garage, and the erection of a single-storey utility room on a smaller footprint. If you can see, the property is backing onto Harvey Drive. It fronts Ditchfield Road. They've got for you there, members, an aerial photograph just to show you the area of land which is subject to the change of use application and the provision of the actual carport alteration is to the side. This is in more detail with regards to the area of land to which the application relates. There is a close boarded wooden fence which separates the pedestrian walkway to the side of the property and shows the included land. There's a close boarded wooden fence goes across, but this includes the whole of the land. There will be no enclosure to the very front of the property. This is an existing floor plan of the property as it is today. This shows you the garage going the full length of between the properties. And the next slide shows you the provision of the single-storey extension to the side, which is the utility room. This has a freestanding wall, so is separated from the adjacent property. This is a photograph showing you from the north, and that shows you down the road associated with the property, and that shows you the garage as it is at the moment. The actual side access is towards this part of the property. Again, that's the existing carport garage that's in existence, and that's showing it towards 10 Ditchfield Road to the west. This is the area of land in question, and it's viewed from the public footpath between the site and 14 Harvey Drive. So if you can imagine, the property is on this side, the adjacent property. Just for clarification as well, this is the existing view that you would see, and the close boarded wooden fence would come across the front here and down the side to enclose this piece of land. And this is again looking at sort of the actual property, and the extension would be over this area here. This is the front of the property, so this will remain. This is where there is no fencing to be proposed in this area, so this part will remain open. And this is a wider view from Ditchfield Road, looking down the road, just to give you an impression of exactly sort of what you see from the front. You'll be able to see there are examples of existing boundary treatments which are of that particular height too in the vicinity. And this is showing you an existing close boarded wooden fence where this type of development has been carried out within the vicinity. There is an update to this report that I just want to read out to members. Oh, sorry, the final slide is about material considerations. The material considerations as part of this application is the impact on the residential amenities of properties, the surrounding properties, and the land use to residential. It's not material, the ownership of the land. And for that, I've just got members an update. There is an error in paragraph 1.2 of the officer's report, page 9 of the officer pack. The land is not under the ownership of the applicant at present. However, the relevant notices have been served on the owners of the land, HDC, and all relevant consultations have been carried out with the parish council and the ward members. A press notice in the Hunts Post has also been issued. The matter has also been through Cabinet. An overview of this is provided in the submitted planning statement. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. We do have the applicant here today, and she is available to answer questions. So if any councillors have any questions at a later date, those questions can be answered for you. So we have no other speakers for this particular application. So councillors, if you have any questions regarding the presentation that we've had for the councillors, have you got any questions? Councillor Davenport-Ray.
Yes, I'm wondering, is it normal procedure for an applicant to apply for a change of use over a parcel before they have purchased it?
An applicant can apply for a planning permission on any piece of land, so the ownership is not a material consideration. So the planning legislation allows people to submit applications on land which is not in their ownership.
Councillor McAdam.
When the fencing is put up, it will actually create an alleyway leading alongside the property. At night, especially during the winter, it could be very, very dark along there and a bit threatening to people. My only question really is, has any provision been made or thought about with regard to providing lighting along there? There is another alleyway to the south of the property, just across the road leading down, and it does actually have a lamp there. I'm just wondering if a similar sort of thing would happen in this case.
There is no lighting there at present in relation to this access, and it isn't any intention to bring in any lighting into this particular area. So therefore it's not part of this application, so we can't consider that. Members will need to consider what's before you. There is no objection to this application from the parish council or any neighbours associated with it.
Okay, are there any more questions of clarification for the officer? Councillor Davenport-Ray.
If the change of use is approved and the domestic curtilage is extended over what's now open space, does that give the applicant permitted development rights to extend the footprint of the building in future?
It does become part of the residential curtilage, so they would take the benefit of that. I think, again, we need to assess the application as we've got before us.
Are there any other questions for clarification? Councillor Wakeford.
Thank you. I think I know the answer to this, but just for reassurance, am I understanding correctly, in the absence of comments or the absence of any objection from the parish and the officer recommendation, that this simply wouldn't be before us at all if it were not for the nature of for the link with the district council?
Absolutely, this is an application which falls within the scheme of delegation, which would normally be an officer decision. It is basically because the actual application is submitted by an officer of the council.
If there are there more questions? If there are no more questions, we can move on to discussion. Is there anyone that would like to start off the discussion? Councillor Niche.
Thank you, Chair. I've looked through this, and again, as Councillor Wakeford has pointed out, this is only here correctly true for transparency reasons. I see no issues with it from a policy perspective. I listened about the lighting, but there's a lot of areas that are similar to that wouldn't have lighting. And actually, if you put lighting in, most people then complain there's lighting down it, so you're on a no-win on that one. But I think I would like to, for clarity and speed, I'd like to propose that we accept this proposal.
Okay, so we've got a proposal to accept this. All in favour?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13.
So that has been passed and that's been approved. We will move on to item 4A, and this is to do with St Ives, and we will have Officer Deborah Bell come and report to us. Thank you.
Right, thank you, Chair, and good evening, members. This application is referred to the Development Management Committee as the authority's recommendation of approval is contrary to St Ives Town Council's recommendation of refusal. Okay, in regards to updates, a late representation has been circulated to members prior to this meeting, requesting requesting the addition of a condition securing obscure glazing to a first floor side window serving bedroom 4. This condition should be added if members are minded to approve the application. Okay, next slide, please. So this is the site. The site is located within the built-up residential area of St Ives and comprises a virtually completed 2-storey dwelling house, which was granted planning permission in 2018. The 2018 planning permission has therefore been implemented, albeit the dwelling has not been constructed strictly in accordance with the approved plan. The application before us is seeking full planning permission for the dwelling, outbuilding and parking, and seeks to regularise the changes to the previously approved and implemented scheme. Okay, the changes comprise alterations to the windows and internal layout. We've got some plans here of what was previously approved. So alterations also to the external materials and finish, enlargement of the front porch and the addition of a rear garden room cycle store. The layout has also changed and it now incorporates a 2.5 metre wide strip of land to accommodate the public footpath that runs to the eastern boundary of the site. So I'll talk you through the plans. So this is what was approved in the 2018 planning permission. So the changes to the windows are more in keeping now with the surrounding development, although there's a bit more weatherboarding to the front and the side of the dwelling. Oops, gone the wrong way. So these are the layout. This is the layout of the application now. And the previous floor plans. This is the new outbuilding that's going to be in the back garden. And here are some photos of the dwelling. Okay, so the main objections raised by the Parish Council are the overdevelopment of the site, highway safety issues in regards to the location of the vehicular access where it crosses the footpath within the turn-in head of Alabama Way. One letter of objection was also received from a neighbour raising concerns about highway safety issues in regards to the access, and you can just see it here in this photograph. Objections to the use of external cladding and overlooking to the neighbouring properties. In summary, the principle of the development and the dwelling and its access has been implemented in this location under the previous planning permission. There are no objections from Cambridgeshire County Council Highways Department or from the Public Rights of Way team. Officers therefore consider the proposal would be acceptable in regards to residential amenity, subject to conditions, and would be of a scale and design appropriate for the locality. The addition of the outbuilding is appropriate in scale and design for an outbuilding and retains a suitable amount of usable garden space. These matters have been covered in more detail in the officer report. Officers therefore recommend that the application be approved, subject to conditions as set out in section 8 of the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Officer. We don't have any speakers for this particular item, so we will go straight to questions of clarification. Are there any councillors that would like clarification? Councillor Sanderson.
Thank you, Chair. Deborah, just wonder if you could clarify the issue of the bollards that are mentioned in the report and access to the footpath, etc. I wasn't quite sure, and I visited the site the other day and there didn't seem to be a problem. So I just wondered if you could just clarify the access issues.
Yes, so the Public Rights of Way team have requested that some bollards should be put up along there to stop any vehicles from accessing the land to the rear of the site.
Would that not have been possible before this was built anyway? That would still could have happened, couldn't it, even before this?
Yes, well, since the first application was approved, the public right-of-way wasn't an official public right-of-way, so that was formalised in 2020 after the application had been approved, hence the layout changes with the site to make way for that public right-of-way.
Councillor Niche.
Thank you, Chair. Could you just go back to the picture of the cladding, and could you just explain to me, because I tried to flick through earlier when I was going through the pictures, is there a difference in what was approved and what is now clad?
Yes, so the original approval had some cladding over part of the front elevation, and it was visible on the front elevation and down the side. That's now been extended across the full top half, the first floor, and down the side of the dwelling, and also part of the side bit there where my cursor is.
No, thank you for that.
Councillor Davenport-Ray.
Yes, I'm interested in the outbuilding. I have a question about the outbuilding. As the building, the residence is not substantially complete, was the outbuilding completed within permitted development rights?
Okay, so the outbuilding has been included because the permitted development rights aren't established until the dwelling is actually habitable and lived in. So hence that's why they've included it in this application. If they'd been living in the property, they could erect this building without the need for planning permission. Does that answer your question? Thank you.
Are there any other questions for clarification from the officer? Councillor Davenport-Ray.
The, the access as built, is it materially different than the original planning approval?
No, it's the same.
Are there any other questions? If there are no other questions, we'll move on to the... Oh, Councillor McAdams.
Yeah, just one little point of clarification. Looking at the cladding, you know, the white outside of the buildings, not in character with the other buildings around. Was that actually agreed in the original application, or is that something which needs to be sorted if we pass this tonight?
That was agreed as part of the original application under a discharge of condition application. They've literally just extended the materials across
Okay.
the full extent of the first floor.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Davenport-Ray.
The cladding as originally approved, is the same material, has the same material been used as in the original application for the cladding?
I believe tonight we're assessing what's in front of us and we consider those materials to be acceptable.
Any other questions for clarification? In that case, we'll move on to the discussion. Is there anyone that would like to start the discussion? Councillor Corney.
Thank you, Chair. This is very much similar to the previous one, to be fair. I've looked through this and the conditions, you know, everything's there to be covered off. I don't have an issue. I can't find anything to have an issue with. So I think, you know, depending on where it goes, I'll be happy to propose it. I don't want to preempt anybody else's thoughts.
Councillor Sanderson.
I'll be happy to second Councillor Corney's proposal here. I think 7.9 of the report sums up any or answers any concerns we might have about the cladding. Regrettable, but the siting and location of the dwelling means that it's not incongruous. It's sort of tucked away in that corner. Then no objections from county highways either regarding vehicular access. So happy to second.
We'll take a vote on that proposal. All four?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12.
Anyone against?
That's 1. So that is approved, Chair.
So that's approved. We'll move on to the next item on the agenda. The next item on the agenda is 4B, which is Brampton. And Officer Carrie Murphy will be presenting that to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm presenting the application regarding 31 West End, Brampton. This is for a change of use from a C3 land use, which is a dwelling house, to a C2 land use, which is for a care home. Just to confirm, in the late reps report that was published in the last couple of days, there is just some clarification given regarding paragraph 6.3 of the committee report, and this confirms that details of the bin store and cycle parking area are not for consideration at this stage. There was a little bit of confusion about this, but as it stands, the recommendation set out in section 8 of the committee report will set out that the details of cycle and bin storage are to be required via planning condition, so that remains unchanged. Those details will need to be approved by the local planning authority prior to implementation in the event that this application is approved. There are also some details of additional representations received further to the publication of the committee report. There were 8 of support and then 3 further representations which had detailed objections. These have been circulated with the late reps report. There are no additional matters in these. There are no material planning grounds to alter the officer's recommendation, but that was just to update you on that. And also, just before I start, there are a number of comments that have been received and regarding public representations, and these are set out in the committee report. And where there are material planning considerations to take account, they've been addressed in the report under the relevant section headings. Right, turning to details of the application. This slide shows the hatched area of the application site. It's an existing large detached residential property fronting West End. It's located within the built-up area of Brampton Village. It doesn't lie within or adjacent to conservation area or any designated heritage assets. As you can see, the area is predominantly residential in character, with the centre of Brampton to the right of the site. To the west and east of the site are detached dwellings with associated gardens, and to the north of the site, its driveway and boundary is West End. The rear garden, which faces southwest, borders neighbouring properties located off Centenary Way. You can see on the slide there's an area of blue line that represents a drainage ditch between the property and its neighbouring property to the south. There's an aerial view of the site, and just to show the context of those residential buildings which surround it. And that's the existing site layout of the property. The proposal is to seek full planning permission for the change of use, as I said, from a single dwelling to a care home facility, and this is for children. The application details that there will be 4 children between the ages of 11 and 17, with 2 staff on site at any time, working 24-hour shifts, and 1 additional day manager. There may be other visitors, such as family visiting the children or social workers at different intervals. The change of use does not involve any exterior alterations. There are only interior changes to provide accommodation. There's no alterations to the ground or the access. This is an existing plan of the property. I say it's a family home at the moment, and I'll just move up there. So there is only going to be internal alterations to that. Just to provide some information regarding this, what the property looks like. This is it from West End. That's it from further away, looking from the west. It's the light pink building, and that's it from the other direction. This is the property once you're standing at the edge of the driveway, showing the sort of existing parking arrangements. You can see it's a large driveway, all paved. This is looking west from the driveway if you were to leave the property, and that is the other way as well. Okay, just so that we're showing where the current parking is. There's a side access, as you can see in this location, which leads to a series of store cupboards. Another side access on the other side of the dwelling, which leads down to the rear garden. This is a view of the property in the rear garden, looking from the ditch area. You can see there's some an outbuilding and some covered sort of patio area. The garden has got a fence so far along it, and then this is the other section of rear garden. Sort of behind this tree here is annex. That's the existing arrangement of the property, and that's the looking from the house towards the rear boundary, and beyond that picket fencing and that hedgerow or hedging is the drainage ditch. I'm just going to cover the main issues, I think, because there has been quite a lot of detail in the report. I'm just trying to summarise it. The main considerations with this application is considering the principle of development, and this is considered to be acceptable. The site is located in Brampton, which is defined as being within the Huntingdonshire Spatial Planning Area. Local planning policies LP2 and LP7 seek to concentrate development in locations which provide or have the potential to provide a comprehensive range of services and facilities. And any applications for use class, which C2, will be supported where they are appropriately located within these areas. In regards to this specialist housing type that this application will provide, it is considered to be compliant with policy LP26. And that is subject to a number of criteria, but that also includes good proximity to shop services and public transport. Regarding this proposal, this will be the case. The other application has also been considered against other relevant planning policies regarding sustainable travel and parking, and found to be compliant, and would provide good access to local services and infrastructure commensurate with the proposed use and the number and type of occupiers. There are positive benefits of providing for a specialist housing accommodation within the community, and it makes efficient reuse of land and of the building. The proposal will not result in the intensification of use of access to the property. The local highway authorities assess the application and the supporting information, and is of the view that proposed use will operate in the same way as a large single dwelling. It is not considered that the proposed use will have an unacceptable or severe impact on the highway network and would not conflict with the National Planning Policy Framework in this regard. Parking on site has been demonstrated to be satisfactory for cars and other vehicles, and cycle parking is also to be provided. Given the scale and use of the proposed development, officers are satisfied that the proposal is acceptable with regards to highway safety and parking provision, and therefore complies with relevant local plan policies. There is also a planning condition proposed which would seek to specify the number of occupiers and as well as the specific use. So also this is important given the consideration of the application and whether it's acceptable or not. Just to cover also flood risk in drainage, this is a matter that's been considered by the submission of a flood risk assessment, given that the site is in an area with different flood risk zones. There's a plan that's up here at the moment. You can see where the yellow circle is, that's the site, and it shows that there is some of the site within flood zone 3, which is a higher level of flood risk. With this in mind, given that it is only for a change of use of the building, a sequential approach, which would normally be looking at other sites which may be more appropriate than one like this. In this case, with it being a change of use, it is not required by the National Planning Policy Framework. The current use is residential and is to remain so. However, some mitigation measures will be required, including an evacuation plan to deal with any extreme flood events. And this is recommended that planning conditions are attached, requiring the submission of further details and then their implementation prior to the dwelling being occupied by the care home. In conclusion, the application would not increase flood risk elsewhere, nor would the development introduce a more vulnerable use. And subject to these planning conditions, the proposed development accords with policy LP5, which deals with flood risk. A couple of other areas to mention. The application has been assessed in terms of its potential impact on character and appearance of the area. As I've said, it only makes internal alterations to the existing property. The use and associated activities and movements are not considered out of character within the residential area. Overall, there would be a neutral impact, and the proposal is considered to accord with LP11 and LP12 of the local plan. With regards to residential amenity, no external changes, as I say, have been proposed, so this would not result in any impacts in terms of overlooking, overbearing, or loss of light. The proposal is not materially different to that within a conventional C3 dwelling of this size, and the standard of amenity that will be afforded to future occupiers as well as those neighbouring properties is considered appropriate. Therefore, the proposal complies with policy LP14 regarding amenity. In conclusion, for the reasons I've set out, the application complies with all the relevant local plan and national planning policies. The application is therefore recommended for approval as set out in section 8 of the report, along with a list of planning conditions is also recommended. I just want to clarify again that the condition regarding flood risk measures, they will be required to be submitted for approval prior to being implemented. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. We have 2 speakers for this particular item. Just so that the speakers know, you have 3 minutes in which to speak. Our first speaker is Miss Caroline Rendell.
I'm speaking on behalf of a group of residents. Our primary concern is children's safety. Vulnerable children will be moved away from their home areas if this is approved, and there's no evidence of local requirement for the development. The applicant isn't a provider to CAMCC, and the LP26F hasn't been satisfied either. National guidance states that Huntingdon DC needs to consider whether children's best interests are relevant to any planning issue under consideration. But as Hunts DC is aware, the site isn't suitable and safe given 1. Flooding. Ambiental's expert report confirms the site isn't safe, and the FRA relied upon in the officer's report is incorrect. The expert report cannot be swept aside and must be reviewed by DMC. 2. Highway safety. There have been 3 recent RTAs. A car crashed into the front garden next door to the site last month and police attended. 2 other RTAs occurred opposite the site last year. 3. Access. There's a lack of visibility, and just because it's already there doesn't mean it's safe and suitable, especially for vulnerable children, and an increased use beyond what the property has probably had for the last 80-odd years. 4. Parking. The parking plan is not accurate, doesn't reflect the site survey, and there isn't enough manoeuvrability. Brampton Parish Council have confirmed substantial issues with the access and the parking. Highways response is clearly based on inaccurate and incorrect information. They haven't considered the public concerns or evidence. Look at the wording closely. There's already a safety issue with on-street parking. If something happens, responsibility will sit with Hunts DC. And as to dealing with the bike and bin storage by conditions, an unworkable and misleading plan was submitted. That's attached as Appendix B to the Ambientals report, so Hunts DC is aware it won't be able to do this safely and suitably. In any event, there will be an impact on flooding, parking, access and manoeuvrability, so shouldn't be dealt with as a condition. Representations were also made at the Parish Council planning meeting that the occupants would be 4 girls aged 11 to 17, who were the unfortunate victims of CSE, and this would be used to secure planning conditions. Those representations influenced the consultation process, yet they've been reneged upon. It's genuinely difficult to follow why the applicant would want to proceed with the change of use, expose vulnerable children to an unsafe and suitable site, when far better locations are readily available. There's no need to compromise their safety. The officer's recommendation for approval clearly relies on information that expert evidence has shown as incorrect and inaccurate. Let's not pretend the site is safe and suitable for vulnerable children just because it's already there, and hope that Hunts DC doesn't just focus on being seen to do the right thing, but actually does do the right thing here by refusing permission.
Thank you very much. We have Mr. James McConnell that will answer any questions that you have for this particular speaker. Yep, if you just stay there. Yeah, thank you. Are there any questions for this particular speaker? Councillor Sanderson.
Thank you, Chair. You say you don't think the access is safe. In what way is it unsafe? Is it leaving the site or entering or both?
Currently there is... Oh, sorry.
Sorry, Caroline.
So you go ahead.
Okay, sorry about that, everybody. At the moment, it's both, and the reason is there's a lack of visibility as you enter and exit the site. The road is on a bend, and the visibility doesn't comply with the standards which are set in the manual for streets. And there's also, obviously, as we identified in the report, there is a footpath in front of the property, but it isn't, or a public footpath, but it isn't actually a pathway. Small area which is narrower, and the whole of the site of West End, because it's a very old road, hasn't been done to modern standards, so it's very narrow, as you'll see on the photos.
So you're saying pedestrian access then? No, you're not talking about vehicular access, because the visibility looks quite clear from that picture.
It does there, but obviously that picture's taken further forward than what you would be. That's taken from a pedestrian view, potentially if you were stood right on the side of a road. But if you're exiting with a vehicle or a cycle from the premises, you would have the visibility blocked by the fence on the other side and also by the existing hedge, which you can see. And there's even a requirement at the moment for visibility mirrors for the current owners.
Are there any other questions? Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Chairman. You state that we've been given inaccurate information. I must defend our officers, if I may, because they don't usually give us a lot of inaccurate information. Will you just explain where you find these inaccuracies?
I'm going to let Jamie, do you want to answer that, please?
Yeah, that's fine. So when we were referring to inaccurate information, we were referring to the information which is in the application. So within the plans which have been submitted, you will see that they don't actually reflect the underlying site survey. So, for example, a tree has been removed from the front, which appears on the site survey. There's also a raised sleeper bed area, and there is a front porch to the property, which, although that has been addressed in the officer's report as being removed, it hadn't been included on the parking plan which was submitted. The criticism wasn't of any of the officers at Hunts DC. It was just explaining that the information which has been submitted, there are inaccuracies in it. It has then been passed on to the local highways authority, who have confirmed that their non-objection was based upon the information which they were provided with, which was the information in support of the application. So they may not be aware of these issues unless they've been identified to them by Hunt DC, and it was extensively explained in the public comments of these inaccuracies. Now, turning to what was said in terms of flooding, I do disagree with what the officer said in terms of some of the site is within flood zone 3. If you look at the flood risk map for planning, you will see that most of the site is within flood zone 3. You will also see that from the proposed plans that there's a new ground floor sleeping area proposed for staff, and that is located within flood zone 3 as well, so that's an increased risk. And there was also an expert report which was attached to the late representations, and it doesn't appear that that has been passed on to the members of the DMC. And I think it's extremely important that is reviewed, because there has been a number of changes. Some were recent, so they won't be included within the local plan of Hunts DC, but these are all fully set out extensively within an expert report, which explains why the site isn't safe and suitable. There's also a difference between the vulnerability of proposed users, even within the same vulnerability classification. That's set out in the new planning policy guidance, which has come out. And there's also a concern that by dealing with the proposed bin and bike store by way of conditions, it won't actually pick up on the increased flood risk or highway issues, because if you have to add something to the front of the property, which you may do because the size of the property are located within flood zone 3, and creation of new buildings may increase the flood risk, there's also that needs to be taken into account.
Are there any other questions for this speaker? Councillor Davenport-Ray.
Thank you. The application before us does not propose any material changes to the access to the site. So can you tell us more about the danger that you foresee from the change of use?
I think the danger is in as much as the property is there, and there are obviously people coming and going, but this will be an increased use of coming in and out of the property. The pictures that you see, the road at that point is pretty clear. It gets very, very busy down that road. The question is also that the children that will be there are vulnerable children. Behaviour is not always the same and in keeping with other children's behaviour at times, and so the safety precautions need to be very, very good and very secure.
And I think also.
Oh, sorry. Where did that come?
Are there any other
I
questions?
I was just about to say that the other thing, which is obviously an ongoing issue, which the Brampton Parish Council will be aware of as well, is there is a difficulty or an issue with speeding and highway safety, which is ongoing, and lots of the public comments have pointed out a number of near misses, and there has been some recent road traffic accidents in the immediate vicinity of the site, and there is a real concern here that although the site has been used as a dwelling previously, it is perceived there will be an increased risk of safety to the proposed residents, and also it will be used on a more intense purpose than what the property actually has for the last 80 years. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Councillor McAdam.
Flooding risk has been cited. I would just be interested to know what the past history of flooding has been on this residence.
Sorry, that question for the objective, because we are aware that the neighbouring properties and the site itself has flooded. There is a real concern about the safety as well, because as you were seeing from the photo, small picket fence which is located at the back, and I know it's been described as a drainage ditch, but it's actually a water course which is managed by the Bree and Ellington Drainage Board. and that is high banked, it's full of silt, and it is extremely dangerous. But if you were to replace that picket fence with a different type of fence, then that would have an impact on flood flow. And it had flooded previously, and we are aware that the applicant also pointed out in their report as to how important the garden area was for the amenity of the proposed residents. And in times of flooding, obviously, they wouldn't be able to have access to that, which would obviously have an impact on them. And there are photos included within the expert report, which
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much. And we'll move on to our next speaker. We have the applicant, who is Mr. Henry Hodgson. Welcome.
All right. Yeah. Good evening, Chair and members. My name is Henry Hodgson. I am the agent acting on behalf of Cambion, who are seeking to obtain permission to change the use of 31 West End to a C2 care home. The proposed care home will reside up to 4 children aged between 11 and 17, who will be supported by staff 24/7 and a manager 5 days a week. These requirements have not changed during the determination of the application. 31 West End is a large detached 6-bedroom property which benefits from sufficient off-street parking and a large private outdoor garden space, providing the children with a high level of privacy. The mode of living is communal, like any other family home, and the creation of a family environment is of paramount importance to the children's development. It should be noted that the home will not be at full capacity from the outset. The process ensures a child is settled before Cambion introduce another into the home. The process of identifying a new home for the children that fall under the care of my client is lengthy. My client has gone through the necessary and appropriate risk assessment and safeguarding protocols expected from Ofsted, the regulator, and are satisfied that 31 West End is an appropriate and suitable home and location to accommodate the needs of these children. All admissions will be planned to ensure that the needs of the young person to be placed and those already placed can be met. The children who will be cared for 24 hours a day by staff that are expected to hold a level 3 or 4 diploma in children and young people and a home manager with a level 5 leadership and management qualification. These are staff that care, have extensive experience and want nothing more than to create a safe and inclusive home for these children. In terms of a regional manager, they will have daily contact with the home manager and will visit at least every other week to carry out a QA audit of the home and monthly supervisions with the home manager. Like any other family unit, all the children will attend school Monday to Friday. My client operates Walnut Tree Lodge School in Bedford, which is a specialist educational facility and is where all the children will attend. The proposed change of use would therefore not place local educational institutions under any additional pressures. I understand that several residents in the parish council have concerns with the proposals, but frankly, these are unfounded and a lot do not actually relate to planning. The report prepared by your professional planning officer confirms that the proposal is fully compliant with local policy and is acceptable from a transport and flood risk perspective and will not result in undue amenity impacts on neighbours. I therefore respectfully request that you support your officer's recommendation and approve this application so that the property on West End can begin in fulfilling the care requirements of the children. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hodgson. Are there any questions for our speaker? Councillor Tevlin?
Thank you for going into detail about the need with the children's needs. With the last speaker, we heard about the issue of flood risk. Mm-hmm. Is there a risk strategy in case of flooding upon this, the review of the flood evidence? What would you do with the children?
So we submitted a flood warning and evacuation management plan, which will introduce mitigation measures. One, for instance, will be the environmental agency. They have a formal warning system that people in the home can sign up to, and they'll give 24-hour warning in the high risk events. But, you know, in terms of flooding, it's going to be conditioned, and my client is willing to provide more information on that in a subsequent discharge of condition application.
Thank you. Are there any other questions for this speaker? No.
Sorry, I'm not.
No. Thank you. So thank you, Mr. Hodgson.
Okay.
So, councillors, we will move on to questions for the officer regarding this particular application. Are there any questions for the officers for clarification? Councillor Wakeford.
Thank you. There's a suggestion made in the late reps and from the first speaker contribution about the questioning the accuracy of the flood zone assessment in the report, and the implication being, I think, that in the event we accepted the flood zone identification was wrong, then officer advice on the necessity of a sequential test would be different. Just wonder if officers could clarify for us whether you accept the accuracy of the facts as well as also if that would indeed impact the sequential test necessity.
Through you, Chair. Yes, in terms of the sequential approach, it doesn't make any difference because it's a change of use application. And regarding the additional information that's come in from the objector, that has been passed to the applicant for them to consider by their engineer to make sure that there was nothing missing or inaccurate, and officers are satisfied that the flood risk assessment as submitted is sufficient. Just to point out the clarification on the vulnerability classification and more vulnerable development and particularly sort of evacuating, being able to evacuate, that is the purpose of the flood warning evacuation plan, that it will be looked at in more detail as the operator, I suppose, takes responsibility for the site and can look at those in more detail, and that will need to be submitted to local planning authority, and we will consider it at the time to discharge that planning condition. Yeah, overall, officers are still satisfied that the flood risk assessment is accurate.
Thank you. And the chair will permit a follow-up on that note then. There's a suggestion made, again, we've heard verbally and in the late reps, that while the two uses are in the same vulnerability classification, there is scope or potentially need to subdivide vulnerability, again with the implication that would change the requirement for a sequential test. Just looking for officer reassurance again, as I think was implicit in the last answer as well, that that's not the case.
Yes. Thank you. Yeah, so whether it's residential as in I suppose a conventional home or a nursing home or a care home, it's still in the same classification. But yes, these potential occupiers are minors, and that is why there will be a need to make sure that mitigation in case of an extreme flood event would be covered by the evacuation plan. So yeah, we are satisfied.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Councillor Tevlin.
Yes, we heard from the first speaker about the current use asking for the requirement of mirrors from the hedges. Is there a consideration or requirement for this new application for a similar requirement to have mirrors?
Sorry, Robin Hobbs, Highways. No, there isn't a requirement for mirrors on the highway, purely and simply because mirrors can give a very skewed view of what's coming along. They're not 100% accurate, and it's something we don't advocate on the highway. So the mirrors you usually see up on the side of the road are always on private land.
Are there any other questions of clarification for our officers? Councillor Wakeford?
Forgive me again. We've also had it suggested to us that the lack of establishment of need would be a vulnerability in the in terms of the confidence of the officer advice. I think paragraph 719 relates to this and appears to clarify otherwise, but just looking for officer reassurance that the, or if you might comment on the extent to which specific evidence on demonstration of need is relevant or not.
Yes, the application didn't come in with, I suppose, figures and numbers saying there was this specific need, but officers are of the view that given the application type and the fact that a organisation is purchasing a property with the intention to provide a facility, that there is that need for this change of use. So yeah, while there's no, I suppose the evidence hasn't been provided, the very nature of an application for planning permission is acceptable in that regard.
But I'd say the advice is that meets the requirement for need sufficient. Thank you.
Are there any other questions for clarification? Councillor Davenport-Ray.
Can I just confirm that the question before us relates purely to the change of use and not to any of the fabric changes, which will all be interior to the building? Is that correct?
Yes, so the application is just for the change of use of the property, and I suppose the plot as well. But yes, there's no other works proposed. Just to clarify on the bins and the bikes storage, they would be for an area for wheelie bins and for a cycle stand. But I think you can see from the photographs, there's ample room. There's obviously also existing domestic paraphernalia regarding bin storage. So we just need to know exactly that is going to be done, and that's why we've conditioned it.
Are there any other questions of clarification? If not, we'll move on to the discussion. Yes.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, I would just like to raise another couple of points of clarification just as you proceed into the debate. So the application before you is for a C3 use, and that is essentially for a specialist accommodation. In your packs tonight, you will see recommended conditions that relate to the occupation to residents under the age of 18. As you proceed into the debate, it is relevant for me to highlight that planning concerns itself with the provision of the specialist use itself and not to do with the end user of the specialist requirement. So in accordance with policy LP26, which sets out the requirement for specialist housing, you will see that there is not a needs assessment required. This is in the Huntingdon SPA, namely within Brampton, and has good access to a range of services as identified in the officer's report. So with that in mind, it was just for the purposes of just clarifying how we consider the end user in the case of specialist housing. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So we will go into our discussion. Is there anyone that would like to start our discussion? Councillor Sanderson.
Thank you, Chair. I don't see really anything to object to in terms of this application. And I did find the objectors were drifting into non-material planning considerations, to be frank, and some of their comments were outrageous at times. And I would like to propose that we approve this application.
Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, a couple of these tonight where the main objectors haven't appeared, which is one of my pet hates. So had it not been for the parish council objecting, this would have been delegated, I imagine, to officers. And their only comments were that the access, they were not happy with the access as it is, and they wanted the wall and the hedge taken down. To my mind, this would have spoilt, it would have spoilt the street scene, because as it is, it looks quite nice. It's a well-kept and a well-maintained building. And I think that would have detracted from the general street scene. So I've got no problems with this at all, Chairman, and I'd like to second the recommendation of approval.
We'll go ahead with that. Councillor Davenport-Ray.
I find the wording and the tone of some of the written objections that have been received regarding the potential residents to be quite unsympathetic and in some places distasteful, actually. And so I commend the officer in your report for addressing some of these, especially around section 7.3 about it cannot be assumed that children living in care would be more likely to behave antisocially or create levels of noise over and above children living in a traditional dwelling. I think that addresses those comments quite well. But some of the concerns raised are reasonable around the flood zone and access. But given the size of this building, I think it's likely that even residential uses would have the same risks and concerns. And so I conclude that those concerns are neither reduced or increased by a possible change of use. So yeah, I'm minded to approve as well. Thank you.
Is there anyone else that would like to make a comment before we go to this proposal? Okay, we'll go to this proposal for approving. And everyone in agreement?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. That's unanimous, Chair.
Thank you, so that is approved. We will move on to the next item, which is item 4C, which is to do with Great Gransden, and the planning officer, Lewis Collins, is coming to present that to us.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. This application relates to off-site highway improvement works, which are a conditional requirement of an outline planning permission granted in February 2019 for the development of 40 homes to the northeast of Mandine Gardens in Great Gransden. This application is referred to the committee as the Parish Council objected to the application due to concerns regarding highway safety, and the officer recommendation is for approval. The site hatched in black is the 40-dwelling development, which is now complete. The area subject to this application is to the southwest of the site, shown with the blue arrow. The junction of Sam Road and East Street was identified during the outline application as being suitable for a footpath, with crossing points for pedestrian movements from Sand Road to the main services and facilities within the centre of the village. The off-site highway improvement works were considered necessary to make the development acceptable in planning terms. This slide shows the pre-development situation where there wasn't suitable pedestrian infrastructure in place, connecting Sand Road with the rest of the village. The council approved a scheme of off-site highway works following consultation with the County Council Highway Team in May 2020 via a condition discharge application. The footpath was then installed, although not fully in accordance with the approved details, due to the requirement for backing slabs given the change in ground level.
This photo shows the corner of Sand Road and the backing slabs. This photo shows the Sand Road junction with East Street, with pedestrian crossings left and right of screen. This is a photo from Sand Road looking towards the junction with East Street, Mill Road and Church Street. The main area of concern from the Parish Council and residents is that the junction is dangerous and vehicles frequently mount the pavement, which poses a risk to pedestrians. This plan shows the new footpath around the bend of Sand Road and East Street. The red dimensions indicating 1.2 and 1.5 metres in width are that previously approved by the Council. The pink dimensions showing 1.17, 1.16 and 1.49 are what has been constructed. Therefore, a difference in between 3 to 4 centimetres along the East Street section of the footpath and 1 centimetre on the Sand Road section compared to that previously approved. It is important to note that these works are subject to a Section 278 legal agreement between the developer and the County Council, which is separate to the planning process. The purpose of this application is to regularise the planning approval with the Section 278 agreement. The condition was imposed to the outline permission to ensure the off-site highway works were carried out alongside the residential development to accommodate the increase in population. As set out in the report, the County Council Highway team do not object to the proposal and consider it a safe facility which provides a benefit to the wider community compared to the pre-development situation. Therefore, for the reasons set out in the report, the application is recommended for approval. We are joined tonight by a County Council Highways Officer who will assist with answering highway safety specific questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. We have 4 speakers for this particular item, and I'd like to welcome Councillor Andrew Pettit to come and speak for the Parish Council. I believe he's on Zoom.
I am indeed.
Fantastic. When you're ready, you may start. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you very much. Thank you. If you can all hear me.
Yes, we can.
This is a very sad tale of decisions based on inadequate information, promises made but not kept, and eventually a fudge that is presenting Great Gransden with a dangerous junction, as was pointed out in February 2019, that is a pig in a poke. On the 20th of February 2019, the officer's report stated that the Highways Department said, and I quote, "The applicant indicates that there is sufficient land that will be under their control," unquote, to improve this junction. As I pointed out at that DMC meeting at the time, this was not true. I was not alone, as there were over 100 objections to this development, most of which mentioned that the increased traffic generation for the Sand Road development would need an improvement to this junction. Highways and the DMC agreed. Hence condition 20, that pointed out that the development could not begin until this condition had been met. Now, the reason for this was to ensure that the highway network is adequate to cater for the development proposed. Now, this implies to me that anything less would be inadequate. I received an email in October 2019 from the Planning Office saying, and I quote, "C20 needs to be discharged prior to the commencement of development." Following that, a great silence descended upon the land. The development has been completed, houses have been filled, and the work specified in condition 20 has not been constructed to specification. Now, the overwhelming feeling in Great Branston is that we were sold a pup and the developer gets away with it, unquote, of condition 20, that merely anoints what has already occurred and leaves the residents of Great Branston with little faith in the democratic process, even less faith in HDC planning department, and no belief at all in the safety of that junction. The tyre tracks across the pavement and the broken curbstone lying in the road that has been reported to Highways, and I witnessed again this morning, serve to notice that. That's our view, that this variation must be refused and a joint meeting with Highways convened to address the safety concerns of the people of Great Brampton. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Are there any questions for this speaker? There are no questions, so thank you, Councillor Andrew Pettit. And we will move on to our next speaker, which is Councillor Richard West.
Chairman? Can you hear me, Chairman?
Yes, we can hear you now.
I do apologise, I'm not sure what happened there. Right, Chairman, if I can please start.
Yes, you may.
Members, please refuse this application. For the officer and the necessary authorities to consult the developer to implement a solution that makes the junction safer for all, maintaining the two-way access for standard saloon-type vehicles, also consideration given to heavy goods vehicles. The officer's recommendation was to ask you to consider the fact that this is a new pavement is on a blind bend, not a straight stretch of pavement. Neither vehicular or pedestrians users can see ahead for any real distance to prepare or take evasive action. I'm sure members on their visit to the site will have noticed the damage to the curb and pavement from repeated daily incursions by large vehicles on this blind corner. For the extension of incursions on the other side of the junction, highlighting the manner in which large vehicles use this junction. Also, vehicle scuff marks on the back wall, highlighting the extreme risk pedestrians take when using this pavement. The condition C20 was debated by Development Management Committee, resulting in the inclusion of a gramping condition. Believe that this condition has not been met with the aims of members at the time and has not reduced safety issues. Madam Chairman, I've been very careful in the words I've used because I understand that as a committee, you need to be concentrated on planning. But the comments made by the Vice Chairman of Great Brampton Parish Council are true. As a local member, I feel I've been betrayed by Huntingdonshire District Council planning. I believe that it's a C road and more consideration should have been given to the junction. And at the time I went down and made it very clear that the developer had not got enough land in his ownership to build a satisfactory junction. All this has been ignored. So, Madam Chairman, as a new councillor elected in May, you'll be unaware of a lot of issues that occurred with this development. But I feel that in my written report to you, that I'm probably moving away from the item in discussion. But the residents and myself have been very badly let down by the planning department. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor West. Are there any questions from the members for Councillor West? No? Thank you very much, Councillor. We will move on to our next speaker, who is Mr. Paul Thomas. Welcome.
Right. Actually, this is the most important minute of my day, and I hope it's effective for you as well. The original planning application hinged on the suitability of the off-site work plans and on residents' irrefutable evidence of insufficient land to fulfil them. So, as you've heard, a Grampian condition was agreed to ensure their completion before main site work started, to be followed by a stop-go decision. Hence, as you will see in the title for this piece, prior to commencement. And actually that also challenges the planning officer's statement today that the works were to be completed alongside the main development. But planning never applied the Grampian application, leaving residents feeling duped. Yet we have been proven right. There was insufficient land. Tonight, the officer's reference to no reported accidents misrepresents the facts in his report. The before and after layout and level of risk are incomparable. It's now worse. The deviation from the agreed 1.5 metre minimum is a Dutch auction gambling with our safety. Claims the curb face acts as a deterrent to incursions are absurd, and there is no refuge. I would be pleased if you could please look at your late reps, not the photograph that was placed up by the planning officer, but that is the situation today. It does not offer any refuge or safety or deterrent at all. Finally, with reference to guidance where new evidence may arise requiring modification, let's act on resident insight and the actual real-life evidence, and please find a safer solution to this junction. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas. Are there any questions for our speaker? There are no questions, so thank you, Mr. Thomas.
Can I just confirm that that photograph is in people's late reps, please?
Yes, it is. Our next speaker is Mr. Mark Gay, who is the applicant or the agent. Good
Hello.
evening.
Hi there, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can. And when you're ready, you can start. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Hello, my name is Mark Gay and I hold the position of Planning Director at Hayfield. To put all discussion into context, the application before you seeks only a 3 to 4 centimetre reduction in the width over short distances of an already approved planning footpath, given the extent of highway land available in the location, coupled with the understandable need to adequately protect and reinforce the neighbouring properties' adjacent garden and boundary hedgerow. It is the need to robustly retain this property's land, which sits higher than the footpath, which has necessitated the incredibly modest footpath reduction proposed. The principle of the footpath has already been deemed acceptable. It is only the very minor reduction in width which is a matter for consideration here this evening. The County Highways technical team has already approved the design before you through the Section 278 technical agreement process. On the basis it has been assessed as being safe, suitable and deliverable. The County Highways Planning Department concurs with this assessment, as does your officer's report. National Highway Design Guidance Manual for Streets also confirms that footways down to a width of 1 metre over short distances where there are existing constraints, such as in this instance, are acceptable. As stated, the design before you comprises the maximum footpath width which can be delivered in this location. Prior to the development taking place, there wasn't a footpath in this location. As your officer's report confirms, the benefit of there now being a footpath clearly outweighs the fact that over small sections only, the width reduces beyond the presently permitted 1.2 metres by just 3 to 4 centimetres to a minimum width of 116 centimetres, which is completely typical and indeed better than many existing footpaths in comparably rural locations. Therefore, for the reasons set out in your report, I politely request that members endorse the officer's recommendation to permit. I thank you for your time this evening.
Thank you. Are there any questions for this speaker? Councillor Davenport-Ray.
Thank you. I have a question about the corner of Sand Road and Mill Road. So I think that would be the northeast section of the junction. In the drawings before us, there is a section to be created as a pedestrian walkway. has the extent of that pedestrian walkway been built as set out in the condition?
Yes, so the extent shown in the photograph in the officer's presentation has been built. The only element that has changed is as per your officer's report.
Are there any other questions? No, so there are no other questions. Thank you very much. And we'll move on to any questions of clarification for the officers. Are there any questions that you would like to ask the officers? Councillor Wakeford.
Thank you. I just wonder if officers might wish to comment for us on the importance of separating questions of enforcement activity and complaint or support in relation to that from the proposal on the table this evening, as unconscious comments touched on both areas.
Yes, so essentially we're assessing the proposal in front of us. My understanding of the trigger was pre-commencement on the 2019 permission. Conditions have to satisfy certain tests in the national policy of being reasonable and relative to the development. In retrospect, I think the trigger point was not correct. You wouldn't put a footpath in without the increased population. The footpath is there to accommodate the increased population. So prior to there being any houses occupied, it's essentially, so I'd say a more reasonable trigger would have been, and as we have done on similar large-scale developments, you'd say agree a scheme prior to 50% and implement it prior to 75% occupation, something along those lines. I'm aware there's been several enforcement cases associated with this development, this being one of them. So there's been constant communication between Hayfield Homes and the enforcement team.
Would you like to comment?
Through you, Chair, if I may just amplify some of the commentary just made. So essentially, under normal protocol, a condition ideally should be discharged before it is implemented. But nonetheless, it does not mean that it cannot be done the other way around, so to speak. The question then comes out of the proportionality in our approach to enforcement. In this regard, while this condition was appended to a permission related to development, as we've heard tonight and as set out in the report, the works themselves were carried out under Section 278 of the Highways Act. With that in mind, we must also be mindful too that planning should not look or seek to control matters that are also covered under other legislation. So while there may be a matter of technical enforcement, the question then remains as to whether it is reasonable to enforce, having regard to this specific piece of work being able to be carried out under highways legislation in its own right. With that in mind, as you'll see to my right, we're joined by Robin Hobbs of Cambridgeshire County Council as well, in the event you have any additional questions specific to the highways works themselves. Thank you.
Councillor Niche.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just thank you for that clarification as well, because I think it is vitally important when a lot of dispersion has been made about what has or hasn't been done and when it should have been done, in the fact that it's a lot of legislation which we all get confused and bogged down with, but obviously clearly officers don't and they work within it, but it can become extremely frustration, as we all know as a committee. So first of all, thank you for that. I suppose my one is to highways, and it's just on record that's here, in that you're satisfied that what has been put in place is the best outcome you can get. That's a bit of a leading question, I suppose. Do you see it as an improvement overall, and are you completely satisfied that it serves the purpose from what the original committee, remembering it extremely well, the few of us that were on it, how long it took us to get through that, to get to this stage, and are you satisfied as the authority with the expertise on that to say that, you know, where your view is from that perspective, please?
Yeah, the Highway Authority view is that what's been provided is head and shoulders over what was there existing. The minor, and it is negligible difference in width. While as a Highway Authority, we'd love to get footpaths of 2 metres, 1.8, 1.5. In some instances, it's not always possible, as you can see from different parish councils jointly minor funded improvement schemes. Sometimes they want a footpath which we can't put in at 1.8 metres. So on the pretense that it's usable, it's in accordance with Manual for Streets criteria in the widths that it's got. It's a benefit over what was there existing, which was about 0.4 metres, no hard edge. So any pedestrians coming around that bend would have been in the road rather than having this 1 metre buffer.
Okay, and through you, Chair, thank you very much for that clarification. And I suppose just as an observation from us all who were on that committee, and it was very difficult when you actually advised that there was plenty of space, and the frustration here is we can see that, but actually what we've got in front of us is what we've got to decide, not what was thought to be possible at the time. Thank you, Chair.
Are there any other questions? Councillor Wakeford. Councillor Davenport-Ray.
Could we return to the slide that showed the visual displays? That might help me ask my question. My question is for the highways officer. The drawing of the visual displays, I presume, is from when the condition was designed. Can you explain to us which parts were completed and which were not, and what are the material differences?
Go left slightly. To the green box. Go left.
Yeah, I've got it in the green box. So like it's the closed down report.
Are there any other questions for the highway officer that he could answer in the meantime?
That members have the drawing in their packs. So I'm happy to refer to the hard copy before me. Page
Sorry,
92.
the question was about displays.
That's the drawing I'm looking at is the one that contains the displays, and I can see the different sections that were as planned.
Okay.
Which parts were completed and which were not?
Everything's completed as according to the plan, apart from the footpath width itself is slightly narrower than the 1.2 metres proposed. So the displays are all in accordance with what was proposed.
When I visited the site, it appeared that the pavement, the junction of Sand Road and Mill Road was not to the extent that's in this drawing. Yes, so in the, it's easier, in the color version, there's a green section of the pedestrianized area plan.
Yep.
And then the gray section is what is built, what has been built. What is the difference between the colors? And
The difference in colours was it's the grass area that's been handed over to the highway to safeguard the visibility display. So that is an actual fact highway now.
thank you.
Are there any other questions? Councillor Wakeford.
Forgive me, it's partly redundant, but for absolute avoidance of doubt, as there was reference in contributions, I think I heard earlier, to loss of half a metre of pavement, the paragraph 713 in the report that reiterates, as Highways representative just mentioned, that 3 to 4 centimetre figure difference that we heard from the representative for the developer, that is the sole extent of difference. It's not half a metre, it's 3 to 4 centimetres of loss.
No, the developer has actually done an as-built drawing, and that is the measurements taken.
Are there any other questions? So we'll move on to the discussion. Is there anyone that would like to start the discussion? Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Chair. As Councillor Naish said, this took us quite a while. I think I was in the chair, actually, when this one came forward. I can assure the newer members it is a great improvement on what it was, because as you come out of Sand Road and look to East Street, all there was a small grass verge and a rather large overhanging edge, which did obscure the view looking up East Road or East Street. Now, to my mind, this footpath is, I know it hasn't been done according to the plan, but it's a great improvement on what it was. But it's like many of these junctions, they rely on the people that own the edges to keep them trimmed back, because everywhere you go now, you get to a junction and you cannot see where you wish to go because of somebody's edges overgrown. So it needs a regular attention. Just looking around there, I just spent a few more minutes there and just tried to imagine the rest of the village, because this is a section where there's very few footpaths at all. There's very little footpath in that area. And this path serves only the purpose of being able to get further out into the main road before you need to turn, because it doesn't go anywhere. It barely you can, if you cross over the road, coming down Sand Road, and use it, but I would imagine very, very few people are going to use this. And if you look in the other sections of that area, there are no other footpaths. They're all grass verges. So this is a standalone safety aspect, I think, and this is what we agreed when we passed the main application for the dwellings, because I don't know if any of you went up there. It has been done to a very high standard, and it's a very good development in my mind. So that's just a comment that I'm making, just a little history on where it was, where it come from. And as the highways officer says, it's not quite done to the depth it should have been, but we are where we are. And what do you do with this if you refuse it? Where's it going to go? So, it's, in my mind, it's take it or leave it. And as I consider it's a great improvement, I'll take it. I don't know whether you wish that to be a proposal or whether you'd like to hear more comments, Chairman.
Can I come back to you for
Certainly.
a proposal? Councillor Wakeford.
Thank you, Chair. I don't doubt that the section of footpath is important to residents, as we heard earlier, and it certainly sounds like there may have been a greater gulf in expectations locally to reality, but in terms of what's before us and what the amendment is from what was approved, the matter of 3 to 4 centimetres within building tolerance, as was set out in the report, I struggle to see a basis to do other than approve this this evening, regardless of the extent to which the broader questions may well need looking into in other respects. That's not material to our decision this evening. That neither is neither I don't see is the history. So I'm happy to make that a second if nobody else is looking to speak. If Councillor Butler wishes to turn his comments into a proposal.
Is there anyone else that would like to contribute? Councillor Davenport-Ray.
Yes. Having visited the site with a child along with me, I would agree that it doesn't feel safe, and the extent to which vehicles mount the pavement in that area is obvious from the damage that exists there. So I take comfort from the fact that Councillor Butler believes that an improvement has been made, even though it does still feel like a dangerous junction. But yes, with the information before us, I don't see a way forward if it was to be refused that would be more suitable to the new residents and their use of that space.
Councillor Niche.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick one, really. Let's just reiterate that, I mean, there's always frustrations with these things, and I think the solution is still acceptable, even if it isn't exactly where it was supposed to be. We're not talking about feet, we're talking about some, sorry, that's old money. We're not talking about metres, we're talking about centimetres. I do feel the frustration from the locals in this, but actually it is a vast improvement on what was there. And actually, when you look at it, as Councillor Butler said, the rest of it is, you know, that they still struggle, which then they get to that bit and it's good. We can't help, motorists will do what motorists do anyway. So I imagine even if we made it another 2 foot wider, they'd still be mounting it and probably parking on it, thinking it's a parking place. So I'm happy to go along with it myself.
Is there anyone else that would like to contribute? Otherwise, I will go back to Councillor Butler for a proposal.
Yeah, and I'm happy to propose we accept the officer's recommendation, Chairman.
And Councillor Wakeford.
And I'm happy to second that proposal.
So all those in favour of the proposal?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12.
Any against? Any abstentions?
0. And that's 1. So that's approved, Chair.
So that's been approved. Thank you. We'll move on to the next agenda, which is item 5, which is appeal decisions. And I will hand over to the Planning Service Manager, Julie Ayres, and she will give us a report. Thank you.
Thank you, members. We will keep this brief. In short, we haven't been in receipt of many appeal decisions over the past couple of weeks. We are starting to see some come through again, so hopefully we'll be in a position to report next month. There will be one appeal of note that we will bring next month, and that is in relation to a listed building and the inclusion of solar panels, which I think will be of interest to this committee. So with that in mind, Chair, through you, nothing further to add.
And that brings us to the end of this meeting. So thank you, everybody.